All right, part two here on the Chase Thomas podcast, where I am now joined by Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints, the Locked On Podcast Network, where I'm looking at him at the Super Bowl with all kinds of media all around him. Ross, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, doing great. Yeah, it's a busy time over here, but very glad to be here with you. Appreciate you having me on. Looking forward to talking some New Orleans Saints with you, bud.
Absolutely, man. It's been a long time coming. You guys officially named a new head coach. It was exactly who, as you pointed out, that was the favorite all along, that it seemed like it was going to be Dennis Allen from the get-go. Eric Bieniemy reportedly had an 8-hour interview with the Saints. There were some other names that popped up, but by and large, it just felt kind of inevitable that it was going to be Dennis Allen. And part of that was because, as you said, he had this great audition at the middle point of this season when Sean Payton was out. And the defense has just been quietly the story in New Orleans the last couple of years to keep this team in contention as Drew Brees got older, as Michael Thomas missed a lot of time with injuries. Obviously, this year with Jameis Winston going down, what kept New Orleans afloat was really what Dennis Allen brought to this team over the last several years. So let's start with Dennis Allen. Were you at all surprised? And also, do you like this hire for the Saints?
I do like this hire for the Saints. Not at all surprised. Like you mentioned, this seemed like this was going to be the way that they were going to go no matter what, right? He knows, Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis, general manager, they were very, very consistent from the beginning about what it is that they were looking for in their head coaching candidate. And Mickey Loomis talked about continuity. He talked about familiarity with the roster, familiarity with the culture, and he talked about head coaching experience. And Dennis Allen checks all those boxes. He's somebody that's been with the New Orleans Saints 12 out of Sean Payton's 16, 15 years in New Orleans. And he's somebody that has seen the ebbs and flows of the culture and each of the culture changes and was on the forefront when it came to revolutionizing the way that the New Orleans Saints became known as a defensive team, particularly over the course of these last couple of seasons when he began to be able to have those personnel conversations along with guys like Jeff Ireland and the fantastic pro personnel staff, formerly led by Terry Fontenot, who's now, of course, with the Atlanta Falcons. A lot of different ways now that you've seen Dennis Allen really step into his own in terms of that defense being sort of crafted in his image, the way that his vision, the way that he really wanted it to see. Now he gets the opportunity to get another shot with that in terms of the roster as a whole as their head coach.
It is fascinating that, I mean, Sean Payton just retired and we've just moved on. Like, that was just such a gigantic thing where people were just like, there were some rumors that like, oh, maybe he wants to do TV and he eventually wants to get out. He was sneaky old, like he's almost 60. He doesn't look it, but he was getting up there a little bit. He's been the Saints head coach for just a preposterous amount of time. He's won his Super Bowl. He has nothing left to prove. He'll always be probably the best head coach in Saints history. But that's also a big responsibility for Dennis Allen to follow Sean Payton, because it's funny to me when I looked at this and I was thinking about this before you came on, was just that, like, you see this kind of coaching change in college all the time. You see where like Bobby Bowden retired at Florida State and then that went to Jimbo Fisher and they just promoted from within. You see that a lot where if programs feel good about the staff below them, that they're like, all right, this is an opportunity to just elevate the guy right behind him. Mario Cristobal just got elevated at Oregon, and then after Willie Taggart left. So you see this a lot more in college, but you don't see it very often in the pros. Do you think that that's something that should concern Saints fans, excite them, that they want to keep this continuity? Is it kind of naive for the Saints to believe that they can just keep this thing going with Dennis Allen running things and them just keep looking and keep performing the way they have in the last couple of years? Or really just come down to, they got to really figure out the quarterback position, because this game is still predicated on what kind of output they get on that front.
Yeah, look, I think the New Orleans Saints tried the rebuild thing before and it didn't work out. And so I think that what you look at 2017 to 2021, which have been their most successful seasons, here recently, of course, winning the division several times in a row, making the playoffs several times in a row, being one, Los Angeles Rams win away from being in the playoffs again in 2022, 2021, despite everything that they went through. You look at the New Orleans Saints, and the thing that they've always sort of prioritized over everything else is continuity, right? Familiarity. Their first step in free agency since 2017 has been retain in-house players first and then go out there and start to try to figure out in terms of, additional or additive pieces that they could bring to their offense or defense. And so I think that for the Saints, what would have been more naive for them was to go opposite their usual flow and rebuild, right? Because then you would have just been entering the situations where you don't have the chance to be competitive. At least in this situation, there's a talented roster. You still have a huge question to answer, which is the quarterback question, which is the most important question that they're going to have to do. And that's going to be the big one that's really going to set the course for 2022. But if they're able to maintain that defense, if they can add some weapons on the offensive side, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to go elite quarterback level, but they definitely have to find the right player for the position and the right player for the scheme.
Was there ever a possibility that they go outside of the family, but they still keep Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael as the coordinators? Was that ever a possibility that Dennis Allen was like, I mean, honestly, I'm good just being the defensive coordinator. It's actually pretty awesome. And just being the Brent Venables of the NFL, where he's like, I did the whole head coaching thing in Oakland. Didn't go well for me. Lost a lot of football games. Right. I had to work my way back up because he wasn't the DC. He moved up the ladder because he replaced Rob Ryan at the time. So it wasn't like he has been there from he had to work. He had to repair his image a little bit after what happened in Oakland. And obviously he has a strong Texas background. I think his dad played at A&M and he grew up in Texas and all that kind of stuff. So he's close. He's a very New Orleans type guy, and he seems like a good culture fit and all that. But I don't know. It's fascinating because I have no idea what to make of the future of the New Orleans Saints. And Ross, as you know, being a Falcons guy with the praise behind me, and you mentioned Terry Fontenot, he has no interest in rebuilding either. And Arthur Blank is not a rebuilding owner. And I don't think Gail Benson is a rebuilding owner. I have no idea what to make of the Panthers' new owner in Tepper. All I know right now is he's kind of not sure what he is and what he wants to do. He just wants to win, and I don't think he has really a plan as to how to get there. So they're the most volatile and probably the team in the NFC South I believe in the least as of right now. But the Saints, the cap stuff is real, and this is not. Now a really it's not real. Okay, so the floor is yours. The floor is yours. As a Falcons fan, tell all the Atlantans who want to believe that the Saints' impending doom is near and dear. Tell me why that's not the case.
Yeah, it's an annual thing that comes up all the time. The Saints had to work their way down from $110 million over the salary cap last year. This year, they're only $74 million over the salary cap. But the thing is that it's all built into roster bonuses and base salaries. And so it's all restructurable. So the Saints can easily get under the salary cap without cutting a single player. Now, they might have to cut some players in order to make room for to make room for new signees and things like that, depending on how they go about it. But the Saints are also not going to sign front-loaded heavy contracts when it comes to new free agents that they do bring in, or anybody that they do bring in that's additive too, including a guy like maybe Jameis Winston that they could look to bring back at the quarterback position, for instance. So what the Saints have done over the course of the past few years, you look at Marshawn Lattimore's contract, Ryan Ramczyk, you looked at Michael Thomas's contract, as well as Taysom Hill's. They have built in multiple double-digit millions of dollars worth of cash into roster bonuses in 2022. That's one of the reasons why the salary cap is so high. What that allows them to do is restructure those base salaries or restructure the roster bonuses so that those players get a huge payday up front. The Saints take the hit over the course of spreading out over the course of that next couple of years, and it never catches up with them because now we're looking at the NFL salary cap skyrocketing into potentially $230, $240 million as soon as 2023. And so that becomes what the New Orleans Saints do, is that they end up banking into those big years where everybody is expected to explode in terms of spending. But instead, the New Orleans Saints are focused on maintaining the nucleus of their team. So $74 million over the salary cap looks scary, but they can get out from underneath that without having to cut a single player.
So who's still part of the core? Like, now that we're kind of transitioning, I mean, Jameis Winston, like, is he still a core piece? I mean, Taysom Hill obviously got paid, but his guy is now out of there, so who knows what his future is like. But Michael Thomas, great player, didn't have him at all last year. And now Kamara, the news of the week in New Orleans, not something any Saints fan, and as a Tennessee guy right here, hurts my soul. We have a Kamara sign outside of Neyland now. He replaced a big name. He's all over here in Tennessee, but it looks like he could be facing a 6-game suspension at least going into next year. It looks like with the I don't know how to phrase this. I got to phrase this carefully. Different statements on Kamara and what happened this week, but
Right.
conflicting statements, I guess, is what we'll go with there.
Mm-hmm.
How nervous are you about Kamara, and what is the future like for Michael Thomas in New Orleans?
The expectation, everything that I've picked up over at the Senior Bowl and everything that I've been picking up here while at Super Bowl Radio Row is that the expectation is that Michael Thomas is a New Orleans Saint in 2022. It doesn't seem that there's any real concern around it at this point. Any situation or any sort of, I guess, adversity that he faced along with the team seems to have resided at this point, and now he's focused on getting back onto the field. There's no timetable for it, though, so we'll have to see exactly how the injury ends up healing and how quickly he can actually get back out on the field. For the Saints, they'd love to have him back for mini camp, training camp, all of that, but we still have to see how that all plays out. But personality-wise or connection-wise, it seems that the franchise and the player and Michael Thomas are now sort of back in the same place on the same page, which is great for them, especially if they are going to be without Alvin Kamara, which is very likely, or at least pretty likely, depending upon how all of this plays out at the beginning of the 2022 season. So that means that the Saints, who are already going to be in the market for another running back anyway, are now going to have to be a little bit more aggressive, particularly in free agency when it comes to the running back market and trying to identify a player that they'll be able to utilize in place of Alvin Kamara, but then also somebody that will complement him throughout the rest of the season, along with Mark Ingram. So it's going to be a bit of an interesting shuffle there. But in terms of the core, who the core is for the New Orleans Saints, it's Marcus Davenport, it's Cam Jordan, it's Demario Davis, it's hopefully Marcus Williams, who's going to be a big-time free agent that I wouldn't be surprised to see the Saints franchise tag a second time if they needed to. Marshawn Lattimore, Paulson Adebo. It's the defense. The defense is their core. And then on the offensive side, you're just looking to see what type of young talent you can bring back to be able to pair up with whoever that quarterback is. Seems like Jameis Winston would be the simplest, easiest solution for them. But we'll see exactly how it all ends up having to pan out. But if you want the core, it's on the defensive side for this team.
What was the talk like for the quarterbacks at the Senior Bowl for the Saints? Are they interested in any name or anyone stand out to them? Could you see them becoming infatuated with any of the big names?
Yeah, the big takeaway right now is that the Saints are going to be aggressive and that they're going to pursue every available option. So I would expect them to pick up the phone and call for Russell Wilson and call the Seattle Seahawks if he indeed hits the market. I could see them, making the phone call to Green Bay if Aaron Rodgers indeed hits the market. Derek Carr, it would be another one that would make a lot of sense for the Saints to pursue reuniting Dennis Allen and Derek Carr. Dennis Allen, of course, was there when the Raiders drafted Derek Carr out of Fresno State.
That's wild. I can't believe it was that long ago. That's
right?
Wild.
Isn't that crazy? And so, there could be a potential reunion there. And there are some other sort of, let's say, mid-level quarterbacks, quote unquote, I guess you would call them, as opposed to having to go to those elite quarterbacks that the Saints could also pursue. Or they could, rely on, again, continuity, cohesion, culture, familiarity, and potentially bring back Jameis Winston, too, depending upon how his rehabilitation goes, which so far is looking good coming off that ACL injury.
If you had to guess, though, do they draft a quarterback in the first round?
In the first round, no. No,
okay.
I don't believe that they do. Now we'll see what happens as these guys end up raising their stock and things like that.
Yeah.
Quarterback positional value, as you know very well, it ends up pushing these guys pretty far up the chain there. But I would look at the trenches in the first round and potentially wide receiver.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the trenches because that's been one of the things that people don't realize about the Saints, and this was something that helped Drew Brees a lot, Kamara a lot, but was Ramczyk. The Saints nailed on the important pieces. They did something the Falcons can't do. So it's like one of those things that just drove me nuts about the New Orleans Saints because, as you know, Ross, we just don't want any happiness for your New Orleans Saints. We don't want any of that. And we've tried the Vic Beasleys of the world, the Tack McKinleys, the Jake Matthews has been solid, but you look at McGarry, you look at Jalen Mayfield at left guard this year, you look at what the Falcons have looked like at center since Alex Mack got moved.
Right.
It's hard. It's really, really hard to build a stable offensive line, but the Saints did a great job with, way back to Max Unger from Seattle. That was a great trade for them at the time. And now you have Ramczyk and Armstead, who have just been these linchpins at the tackle spots. And you got Ramczyk and Armstead in the first round. You developed them. They've been great. So are they still part of the core piece? Have they fallen off a little bit in the last couple of years? What do you make of the two linchpins at the tackle spots? Because that's also going to be a big part of the success of the next quarterback who comes in there, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think both of them dealt with injuries last year. Teron Armstead has consistently battled injury throughout his career, but has always been able to be one of the best tackles in the NFL when he is out there on the field. He wants to return to New Orleans. He's on an expiring contract right now, and I think the Saints would be wise to bring him back, even despite the fact that there have been dealing with some injury concerns around him, and his 2022 season, or 2021 season rather, effectively came to an end early. And so, a big part of the reason why I believe that it makes sense to keep him around is because otherwise you carry in a $13.4 million dead cap hit if he leaves. But otherwise, if you're able to extend him, then you end up knocking that salary cap hit down. You keep the player and you save money in the short term. So that would be another way for them to build cap relief beyond cutting a player, but instead by keeping one. And so I would look to see if they're able to do that with Teron Armstead. Ryan Ramczyk dealt with injuries last year, fought his way back late in the season, and he is still, if not their best, certainly one of their best offensive linemen alongside Teron Armstead. So they've always invested in the trenches. They care very much about it. You look at all of the early round selections that they have on that offensive line, they're consistently investing there, and I would expect them to continue to invest there again, especially if they extend Teron Armstead, because you're not looking right now to replace Teron Armstead, but instead you might be looking to have your insurance plan or your succession plan getting started behind him, which they haven't been able to get done so far.
Why didn't Pete Carmichael get a bigger look? Is he just like cool? Is he just hanging out? Is that man just like, I am never going to interview. I'm just going to be the Saints OC for the rest of my life?
That's exactly it. They asked him if he wanted to, they approached him for an interview, and they were fully intent on interviewing him, and he basically turned down the interview and said, no, I'm okay where I am. He likes his offensive coordinator role. But the thing that's interesting is that there are some reports saying that while Pete Carmichael will remain on staff, he might not remain on staff as the offensive coordinator. So that could mean that the Saints are looking to fill both coordinator roles, defensive coordinator, which of course was vacated by Dennis Allen, getting the head coaching job, and then also looking to fill that offensive coordinator role, if that's true, and Pete Carmichael is not the guy moving into 2022.
Is there a chance that they go in-house on both coordinator elevations potentially, or do you think both potentially would probably be on the outside?
I think it's more likely that defense is internal, whether that's defensive line coach and assistant head coach Ryan Nielsen, or that's Chris Richard, the secondary coach that had interviews with the Ravens, Steelers, and Colts. Unfortunately, didn't get any of those positions, but does have a chance to elevate here within the New Orleans Saints system. The thing that's going to be interesting is, as you mentioned earlier, Dennis Allen coming in as a defensive head coach, he wants to call the defensive plays. So how does that impact people's interest in the defensive coordinator role in New Orleans? We'll have to see how that all pans out. Over on the offensive side, though, it makes a lot more sense for that to be something that is outside of the organization. The only other the only other coach really that makes a lot of sense to elevate from a current positional coach spot to an offensive coordinator role would be Ronald Curry, their quarterback coach. He's only been their quarterback coach for 1 year. Usually when you're grooming an offensive coordinator, you have them at that quarterback coach, that QB coach role for a couple of seasons, and then you start to look to elevate him there. I believe that is the track for Ronald Curry, as he will eventually be an offensive coordinator, and I believe in the future a head coach. But for right now, I don't know if it's necessarily the time to elevate him, or if they feel that it's a time to elevate him yet. But he would definitely be an internal name to watch, but I would expect them to go outside of the facility. They had an 8-hour interview with Eric Bieniemy. There's been some reports about Eric Bieniemy's contract potentially expiring. I don't know if maybe the Saints hit something there. If they, I've done that before, right? I've interviewed for something and then didn't get the job that I interviewed for, but got something else instead. That could be the case for Eric Bieniemy if that happens.
That would be fascinating, because I thought you were going to go with like just the Chiefs staff and like the fact they were interested in a Chiefs name, that like Matt Nagy, who is now out of a job, you bring him back in as an OC and get back to what he is. Doug Peterson back in the game. Darrell Bevel, he's available. There are some OC names around the league, so if you want to do some retread options around the league, the Saints have a plethora of offensive names to choose from. Is Ryan Pace coming back to the organization, or no? Is that probably not happening, right?
That was an interesting one, because there was some talk about potentially after Sean Payton stepped away, that there might be some front office changes. Mickey Loomis moving from general manager into maybe a vice president role, or some type of presidential role within the organization, which would then allow Jeff Ireland or Kai Harley to move into the general manager role. And if that were to happen, particularly if Jeff Ireland would have moved up, then that would have been a perfect spot for Ryan Pace to end up. Would have been the VP of college scouting, right? And so that would have been the spot for him. But it doesn't look like there's any changes coming for the Saints front office at this time, so I don't expect Ryan Pace to rejoin the staff, at least at this moment.
Okay. Last Saints thing. Who do you think, if you had to guess right now, it is February 8th, Ross, who is the starting quarterback in Week 1 for the New Orleans Saints?
My expectation is Jameis Winston.
Okay. What would you?
Would
Is it what percentage points are you doing for Jameis on opening day?
That's a great question. I would probably say some like 60%, something like that.
Okay.
Right? There's
kind
a
of a
lot of
flip.
options. Yeah, there's a lot of options there, but it's better, a little bit better than 50-50, I would say. It's just so early in the offseason. I'd probably hedge it a little bit, but I would expect that it's going to be Jameis Winston. He's the easiest situation. He's familiar. He fits the role of what it is New Orleans Saints MO is over the course of the offseason. So that's what I would expect at this time.
Man, you have me thinking about Derek Carr. Derek Carr actually makes a lot of sense. You go down that second. Yeah. I like that. But then I could also see McDaniels liking a quarterback like Derek Carr. Yeah. So tell me about Radio Row. So you're in Super Bowl. You're in Los Angeles, Ross. Let's end on a happy, fun note. We don't want to talk Saints this whole time. Who would say on this very podcast? No. What have you been seeing? What have you been hearing? What have you been doing? How is the Super Bowl in Los Angeles?
Yeah, we're having a great time here. We have our whole Locked On crew, a whole bunch of folks that are here, gathering a bunch of content and everything, and taking care of our local shows as well as all of our television stations and everything. So we're getting a lot of great stuff. Speaking with a lot of great folks. We actually just wrapped up a couple of interviews with Solomon Wilcots, and we also had a couple of other folks out here earlier. So really excited about what we've got. It's going to start to pick up more and more and more over the course of the week as we get closer and closer to game day and more players start to show up and all of that. So we're very excited about the list of folks that we have coming up here very soon. I know I'm really excited to talk to Kyle Turley later on this week. He, of course,
Saints legend.
One of the most iconic Saints moments when he threw that New York Jets player's helmet in the field to play. Phenomenal. So, we got to ask him about it. So we got a lot of great stuff coming up that's been throughout here. It's been awesome. We've had a really, really great time. And, a lot of the conversation around here so far has been, toward the hiring practices in terms of head coaching when it comes to the NFL. So there's been a lot of conversation around that topic here. We have a press conference with Roger Goodell here in a couple of days. I actually believe it's tomorrow, if I remember correctly. And then we also have a couple of other pieces that have been floating about and everything as people are talking about what's going on with Kyler Murray, what's going on with Aaron Rodgers, all of that. So a lot of speculation so far, a lot of differing opinions, and ultimately we'll see what happens in those areas. But a great place to be to pick up and see what it is that people are saying for sure. Any
Aaron Brooks sightings, Pierre Thomas?
Nothing just yet.
Situation.
Yeah, we'll get them very soon, though. I believe we'll have a couple of folks out here, but I'm really excited about the folks that we have lined up so far for sure.
I also, and we'll wrap up here on this. So we're Instagram followers. We follow each other on Instagram, Ross, and you crack me up. You haven't done this in a while, but your videos that you did with your now wife, because I think we did the last pods before you got married. So you're officially a married man, Ross. Congratulations.
Thank you
you did this great bit. You I love doing bits with the Sports Renaissance woman. There's nothing better than a bit that they cannot stand. There's nothing better than a bit that is incredibly corny. Do you have one in the wings? Do you have one ready, Ross? Do you have one for this audience right now? Because I haven't heard one in a while.
Absolutely. Okay, one of my favorite ones. Here's one of my favorite ones. What did one snowman say to the other snowman?
Oh, no.
You smell carrots? It's one of my favorite ones. Super simple. And I have a variation on the guess what chicken butt joke if you want that one too. But you got to play along.
Let's go. All right?
Yeah. So you walk into somebody, you say, guess what?
What?
Good job. Did it. Wow. That's awesome. Did a
Incredible.
Great job. Yep. Love it. Absolutely love him.
Great stuff, man. How to good folks
like this guy's actually like really intelligent, and then I just messed it all up with that last segment. So this is who I really am, everyone.
No, we want the real stuff. We don't want just the all hard-hitting NFL and Saints news. No, we got to keep it light a little bit. We got to have some fun here, Ross. Right. So how do the good folks check out the Locked On Network, the Locked On Saints, and all of what you're doing this week and going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to keep up with the New Orleans Saints, the easiest way to do that would, of course, be to follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola, N-O-L-A. And, of course, you can check out the Locked On Saints podcast every Monday through Friday. If you're not a Saints fan, don't worry. We have every other NFL team covered as well here on the Locked On Podcast Network, as well as the NBA, NHL, MLB, and, of course, dozens of college teams as well. Best way to keep up with everything going on around Radio Row, though, is to check out the Locked On NFL YouTube page, where we're uploading all of our interviews, short snippets, doing daily shows, all that as well. So lots of content being made, lots of content being presented, and it's available for you free and on all platforms.
Awesome. Awesome. Ross, have fun this week. Keep up the great work, sir. And don't be a stranger.
Hey, you got it, buddy. I appreciate you. Always a pleasure to be here with you, man. Thanks for inviting me on.